We're very happy to be hosting this announcement today on the traditional territories of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas peoples. It's also really meaningful to us to be doing it in this space, in our lodge, which is the sacred heart of our building here at 30 College at Native Child, and very fitting for an announcement about children who make up the sacred center of our communities as Indigenous peoples. To start us off today in a good way, I'd just like to welcome up Alita Sauvé, one of our traditional knowledge keepers here at Native Child and Family Services. Welcome, Alita.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Chachalola hotia dididen, zimitikolma ushe, saskia ushe, nehio ushe, haidagwai ushe. That's my mother's language. My mother is a Tahltan woman. Her name is Hosle Ma. And I was speaking that language because I am from the Crow clan and follow the maternal lineage of my people. My father is a Cree man from Red Pheasant. And I'm grateful to be here this morning to welcome in a good way with tobacco that Jeffrey has offered me this morning to open up this event. And I just want to say, Chachalona Hotia, Adigadenatia, good morning to you, great mystery. Is that little bird come to talk to you? I only have a very short time to be able to address you this morning. And so I ask your indulgence, and I would like to offer a prayer song instead of a long greeting to every aspect of creation. And in doing so, I send from my heart, on behalf of Native Child and Family Services of Toronto and of this esteemed event today, our greetings to all of creation. Hemil na gwangi taskino yana hene. Hemil na gwangi taskino yana hene. Hemil na gwangi taskino yana hene. Hemil na gwangi taskino yana hene yoa. No tawinan weche hinan yana hene. Maskiki mi wasnama yana hene. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hene. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hene yoa. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hene. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hene. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hene. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hey neoa. No tawinan weche hinan yana hene. Maskiki mi wasanama yana hene. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hene. Hey mil nagwan gitaski no yana hey neoa. I like to honor both sides of my family, and so that's in Cree, and roughly translated, it means, our mother, the land, is beautiful, and the medicines are good. Thank you very much, and have a good meeting and event. All my relations.
Chimigwechalita for starting us in a good way. It's now my privilege to introduce the Honorable Jill Dunlop, Associate Minister of Children and Women's Issues. Welcome, Minister.
Good morning, everyone. Miigwech to Alita for starting us off in a good way. Thank you so much. I want to thank Dr. Jeff Schiffer and Native Child and Family Services of Toronto for hosting us today. And also thank you to Nicole Bonnie for joining. I'd like to thank both of you for your incredible leadership and collaboration during the child welfare modernization. I also want to thank the dozens of child welfare experts, the over 3,500 current and former children in care, foster parents, family lawyers, and frontline workers, and others who consulted with our government over the last year to bring us here today. This has truly been a group effort, and I am so honored to work with all of you. Today is a monumental day in Ontario for child welfare. There are many good things to speak about. But first, I want to acknowledge and speak about the current realities of what is happening in our province. The historical reality is that many parts of Ontario's child welfare system go back more than 125 years to a time when women were not even allowed to vote. Since that time, there have been numerous efforts to reform child welfare services. However, many of the harmful assumptions on which the system was based still remain, fixing that will require more transformative solutions. We know there is an overrepresentation of Indigenous, Black, racialized, and 2S LGBTQ children and youth in care. Canadian census data tells us 30% of children under the age of 15 in foster care are Indigenous. At the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, Black children and youth are overrepresented by 5 times their population. We know that children and youth in care experience significantly worse outcomes than those not in care. The high school graduation rate for kids in care is only 46% versus 83% of all youth in the same year. 43% of homeless youth have been in the child welfare system. And according to a 2014 survey, half of the girls who have been sex trafficked were or had been in the child welfare system. We have heard that the services that young people and their families need are not consistent, coordinated, or efficient. Ontario has 50 children's aid societies. All have different approaches to providing services to children, youth, and their families. And young people and families have trouble accessing services that meet their unique faith or cultural needs. We know that child welfare investigations can be intrusive and traumatic experiences for families and children, particularly when a family simply needs some supportive services. And we know that families often feel the system focuses on keeping them apart rather than keeping them together. Ontario's children and families deserve a modern child welfare system, one that puts children, youth, and families at the center of our efforts. We want to do more to help moms, dads, and children be healthy and safe. We want children to grow up with their parents and their communities so that they aren't coming into care and will not need the services of a society. We want to keep families together when we can, reunite them when it's possible, and create them only when necessary. And so I am here today to say that our government is taking action to fundamentally redesign Ontario's child welfare system. We are changing the culture from protection to prevention and putting children, youth, and families at the center of decision-making. Child welfare should not be the system that is feared. No one should be scared to lose their children for speaking to a children's aid society. No woman should be afraid to go to a shelter for fear of losing her children. Instead, our vision is for child welfare is part of a range of integrated and coordinated services that support families in the least intrusive way possible. This would include more community-based prevention and early intervention services, a greater promotion of family-based settings over group care where appropriate, and a system that gives children, youth, and families a strong voice in decisions affecting them. That is our vision, and through engagements with youth, families, caregivers, frontline workers, and child welfare sector leaders, we have developed a plan to achieve it. As we work to change the culture, our focus will be on continuing to work with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis, and urban Indigenous partners to support their families and to expand access to customary care. Improving integration and coordination of services between children's aid societies, local communities, service providers, and community-based organizations. A focus on enhancing access to education supports and employment projects for children and youth in and from care to help them feel confident in transitioning out of care and into adulthood successfully. shifting investments from protection services to community-based prevention that better serve diverse kids and families, including Indigenous, Black, racialized, and 2S LGBTQ children and youth, and those with special needs. Improving the overall quality of residential placements while focusing on family-based options like kinship and foster care rather than group care, including encouraging more faith and cultural communities to adopt or foster. Developing a centralized adoption intake service and service standards, increasing centralized adoption matching, and adding more post-adoption parent training and peer supports across Ontario. As a first step in changing the culture, we are releasing Ontario's Quality Standards Framework and the Children and Young Persons Rights Resource. These resources will help give children and youth a better understanding of their rights, a stronger voice in decisions about their care, and support residential service providers in delivering high-quality care. We know our plan for transformative change is significant, and we know it will take time, but we are committed to the hard work that's needed to get this right. I believe we can build better futures and better outcomes for children, youth, and families in need of welfare and counseling services. We can intervene earlier with a less traumatic and lasting impact. We can increase graduation rates by working with the education and post-secondary sectors. And we can increase adoption rates by bringing the system out of the age of the postal code and into the age of the IP address with an online centralized adoption intake service. It will take collaboration across the child welfare sector and with the other organizations that interact with children and families each day. We need cooperation across multiple sectors, particularly those responsible for delivering the services, including children's aid societies, community-based service providers like schools and women's shelters, residential providers, and Indigenous partners. And throughout the whole process, we will continue working with our partners so that all children and youth are safe and get the supports they need to be the best they can be. And we will continue putting them at the heart of all that we do so we can build the child welfare system that Ontario's children, youth, and families need and deserve. So that's what we're building here, starting today.
Your first question comes from Chris Rushewy from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi, yes. I was wondering what other jurisdictions that you've looked to when you're looking at the reforms for children's aid and how you balance the protections that children need versus, not being as intrusive or, as you said, as harmful as the system has been.
Well, thank you for your question, Chris. We've looked to many jurisdictions, not only in Canada, but across the world. And what we found in those jurisdictions where there was transformative change was that it did take time, and these changes take time. We are focused on a system that is looking at prevention and early intervention because we know that that's most important. A child is best raised in their own family. Now, whether that is with a mother and father or with aunts and uncles or grandparents, that's where children need to be raised, not in group homes where we have seen the worst results, youth homelessness, interaction with other government systems such as the justice program and other social service organizations. But we are really looking at the heart of working with families and best supporting them early on, rather than waiting and intervening with police and children's aid societies later on when a crisis comes into effect. We want families to be supported. We know that in some situations, children are being taken from families simply because of poverty, not because these aren't loving parents and families. So we need to support those families to stay together, to work together, and to have the best outcomes in the future for young people.
Follow up?
Yes, and I was just wondering how long that these reforms are going to take to be implemented, and if you're going to have more funding each year as the reforms are implemented.
We have short-term and long-term results, and as I said, these aren't quick changes that are happening. As we see children, and right now, children's aid societies' budgets are only 8% prevention. So we're looking at that as being the ultimate goal of the child welfare redesign is the prevention and early intervention supports given early. If you look at the cost of group homes and the results and outcomes for young people, it's astronomical. We need to be supporting families in the early stages and when these are young people in keeping families together.
Thank you. Your next question comes from Ken Jackson from APTN. Please go ahead.
Hi there. I'm quickly trying to read all the documents you guys have released as you were talking because you gave a giant overview but no details. So I'm trying to find the details in all this. So I'm looking for, first question is there any new money announced today on this?
There is no new money being announced today. We're looking at a redesign of the system from a protection-based system to a prevention and early intervention, and really working with children's aid societies and the supports within communities as well, and bringing those supports together. Because we did hear from families that geographical challenges in some areas and not understanding the system and where to go to for supports. We want children's aid societies to not be the scary person to go to and that you're worried about your children being taken away, but in fact who you go to look for the supports in the community and to best connect families to those supports for best outcomes for children and the families and keeping them together.
What you have described, and generally, because you just spoke in generalities or overview of what you want to do, we're talking about years, if not decades or generations, to do what you want to do. So I'm wondering if there's going to be any amendments to the Act to further this along quicker, like any sort of concrete goals that agencies that you speak of that have been part of this system and design, basically are involved in everything that happened. What's going to happen? Basically, is there any amendments to the Act that will force this along quicker?
There are no new amendments to the Act at this time. We are looking to work with the children's aid societies and the organizations in our communities that are funded and supporting those organizations to come together to work with families and provide the services that are already there. We've heard from families through our consultations that they didn't feel their voices were being heard. So working together to create a wraparound service of supports in the community to address the issues of concern within families. In some cases, it may just need access to mental health supports, access to parenting projects, but bringing those supports together to work with families.
Thank you. There are no further questions. This does conclude your conference call for today. We thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.